Hey everybody, Lieutenant Joe here for Hope is Not a Tactic. So we had part one of running drills of value. Well, today we're going to talk about part two. We're going to cover some more concerns. So seen in series, if you look at all of these episodes, like I said, if you reach out to me, Joe at Pangaro Training, and ask me, I will send you the document that we use to create this program. And it's pretty good source document for you how to run a drill, what you need to be concerned about. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try and share my screen here again. All right, hopefully everybody can see that. And we're going to go to the slideshow. This is where we left off. We were talking about preparation goals of the drill. And that's all important. Why would we? Let's recap real quick. Running a drill of value. Every time you run a drill, there should be a goal. We want to test something, see something, understand our policy, our procedure, how our people function, how our equipment works, whatever it is. And that's where we came through with these things, these different ideas for preparing for the goal. How is communication work? How did the drill end? Who called it? All those kind of things we covered in episode one. We're now going to look at more in episode two. So one thing to keep in mind about the drill team, when you send your team out, the drill team should be positioned to make specific observations during your drill. So if you have to send them out, you finish your pre-drill meeting, you decide this is our goals, we're going to do, they're all ready to go, send your team out, let them get into position. I don't know, depending on how big your school is, give them 5 minutes, right? It's 8 o'clock, at 8:05, we're going to pull the pin and do the lockdown drill or whatever. Give them time to get there. You want to see things, how is it activated? How long did it take for full lockdown? That's something you could look at. Could anyone be seen while they were locked down? Go around, you look in the classrooms, you look, can you see people? Did they have window covers, right? We're going to cover all that. Did they lock all that? And then documenting the drill. What did you see when you're done? Document all that and go back. All right, so the next thing we're going to talk about are concerns. All right, so I think we covered the reason for the drill, looking at the drill and that kind of thing pretty well. Now we're going to look with concerns. What are the concerns about a good drill? Well, you want to make sure you're in compliance with rules and practices. So we talked about in episode one about, do you call the lockdown? Do you let it be? Is it advance notice or is it a surprise lockdown? Depending on your state, check your state rules and regulations on these things because some states have changed. New York now says all drills have to be announced. This is a drill. This is a drill. That's what New York decided is important. So therefore, if you're in New York, you want to make sure you comply with all of their rules and regulations. But check your state and find out. Does everyone know your emergency operations plan and what they should do? Now, this came up just recently. I did a tabletop exercise with a very, very large, prominent summer camp that's getting ready for kickoff for the season. And they wanted to do a tabletop. So we did a big tabletop on emergency responses with their team. I think there was 10 or 11 of them. And one of the things I had them do is bring their emergency operations plans, their policies, their procedures, whatever they had. And as we did the tabletop, we would go through it because the key is all of your people, everyone, your teachers, your staff, your administrators, the custodians, everyone that's part of the team needs to know the operation plan and what they're supposed to do, right? So it doesn't matter. Any of the teachers, they might not be on your emergency response team, but they need to know the policy. What are they supposed to do? They're supposed to understand that plan to make sure everyone's good. So my point being here is that we all think our people know the plan because we tell them, right? In the beginning of the year, we have a meeting, we go over that plan. Some people go in detail, other people, what I've seen in lots of schools is they just basically go over the material. Okay, everybody got that? Move on to the next topic because your time is limited. So the reality is you got to make sure they know that plan because while the chances are low anything will happen to you, if it does happen to you and nobody knows the plan, that can be devastating to everybody. So what I see schools doing is realizing they need more time to discuss safety and security issues. So it's not a 2-hour block over 2 days of start of the year in service. It might have to be 4 hours or 4 hours for 2 days or whatever it is. Make sure people understand your plans. Staff outside of that, staff outside, people that take children outside. This can be recess, lunch, gym, sports, arrival and departure. We want to make sure we understand what goes on at those times so that you are prepared. Now, so far, we've been lucky across the nation. We haven't had an attack at the start of the day or the end of the day, but that doesn't mean it won't happen. And when I ask schools, can you do a drill in the beginning? That's too difficult. It's too difficult at the end of the day. It might be, but it's something to work on. One of your goals might be to see, let's see if we can do a drill first thing in the morning when the kids are arriving. Let's see if we can get kids back on the bus. Let's see if we can get the kids that are out into the building when there's a threat, whatever it is. But anybody that takes people outside, that goes outside with students, should have a radio and an ability to contact you and hear you. So if they're out on the sports fields, you got to make sure your PAs work out on the sports fields. If you have the flashing blue lockdown lights, you got to make sure that they're out there and they're functioning so people know. Even if there's, in gyms is interesting. And this is not an outside thing, but I see in a lot of gyms, they say, oh yeah, we can hear the PA when the kids are sitting here quiet. Well, what about when the kids are playing volleyball and screaming and hollering? Can they hear it? No, we really can't hear it then. That's why lockdown lights are so important. Boom, they start flashing. Everybody knows what that means. Overcomes the noise, right? Do you use code words? Now, I still see people using code red, code orange, code blue. Well, it's easy when you're in a room talking about, well, code orange means lockdown and code blue means shelter in place. But when there's an emergency, when there's a real threat, using code words is going to confuse people, right? We want to use plain talk. Now, the reason we went to codes initially when this happened is, the shooter will know what we're doing if they hear us saying lockdown. Well, in this day and age, everyone that's going to attack us knows soon as they announce their presence by shooting out your glass, kicking your door, doing whatever they're doing, they know you're going to go into lockdown. So clear talk is the best way to go. Lockdown, lockdown, lockdown. Shelter in place, shelter in place, shelter in place. Evacuate, evacuate, evacuate. That's the best words to use. Don't use code words anymore. I'm suggesting it's a detriment. In an emergency, who has to remember? Don't confuse code blue with code orange, right? Then they do the wrong thing. And then ending the drill. How do you end the drill? So I see a lot of people say the only one that can end the drill is the principal. The principal has to go around and say, the chicken flies at midnight. The chicken flies at midnight, because then everybody will know that it's the principal and it's safe. The concern being is that the gunman would take the principal hostage and make them call the drill off so everyone comes out so they can attack. While that is understandable that would be a concern, it has never happened, right? So we have to look at things that are probable. Could someone do that someday? I suppose. Has it ever happened? No. So again, using all kinds of crazy codes and everything to get out of lockdown, you might want to say, the principal will say, the drill is over. Everyone can come out. Or like some places do, they have the emergency staff. Everyone has a key and they key into the room and they say, hi, Mr. Jones, Mrs. Smith here. The drill is over. Good job, everyone. Whatever you choose to do, make sure it's consistent and that it's simple, right? Make sure everybody follows the rules. So those are some of the concerns. How about students affected by the drill? So a trauma-informed drill is part of a new wave of mental health concerns that we're doing, finally, in many aspects of schools and law enforcement and wellness and all these kind of things that we never thought about before. We're starting to do that. So the concerns that a lot of people have is that a lockdown drill, because the nature of it, a fire is one thing. It's a fire drill and we get out and we're not traumatized by that. But the idea that we're doing, a lockdown drill because someone's going to kill us, that can be very traumatic. And it can. There's no doubt about it. There's some people whose mental abilities do not allow them to be okay with that and to respond. So when we do big drills, when I've done big drills with role players and all that, we had an opt-out function, which would allow parents to say, listen, my son, my daughter would be too upset by a lockdown drill where there's, police running around and all that. So we're opting them out. They could stay home with no penalty. So you want to consider, Um, you know, how do we do these drills so they don't affect the students? And that's messaging. Now, when I was a young person, we used to do duck and cover from nuclear bombs. And that sounds kind of funny today. Why would you duck and cover from a nuclear bomb? It was from the radiation or the fallout we were trying to protect ourselves from. But the reality is, we weren't traumatized by that. I'm sure some people were, but the rest of us kind of got it. Duck and cover, duck and cover. We did a bomb drill. The kids today that I have seen across the country, when I do threat assessments and I talk to them age appropriate about what they know, and they understand what's going on. They see the news and they're okay with the drill. What I ask them though is, does your school take the drill seriously or not? And some places they say, yeah, they take it very serious here, and we all take it serious. Other places say, no, it's a joke. It's a joke. It's so stupid. If anything happened, we're not ready, right? So students who may be affected. So maybe you ask, send a letter home. Communication, messaging is very important. We're going to do an announced and unannounced drills, unless your state law says you can't do unannounced drills. What about your special needs students? Now, when I got to the school district as the security director, we had a population of kids, special needs kids, that were self-contained classroom. And I went down to meet with the teachers and I said, what do you do during a lockdown? And they said, well, we follow the lockdown. We do whatever we're supposed to do. So one of the things we did is we put in sensory bins in the rooms. Now, I know a lot of schools do it, so you probably do it already too. If you don't, though, a sensory bin is something that you fill with items tailored to the students you have who would be in there, that can help them stay occupied and calm for multiple hours at a time. If there's a real incident, you're going to be locked down maybe for hours. So having things in there that can occupy them, soothe them, comfort them, and keep them occupied is very important. So that's what we want to think about that. Now, I know in Sandy Hook, one of the moms who lost her daughter, Josephine, is Michelle Gay, and Michelle is a national speaker on this topic. She's a wonderful woman. She's saving lives out there, and her daughter was a special needs child. Well, she said to me one time, when I talked to her about this, she says, "Hey, those kids get killed too." And that's sad and it's scary, but it's a reality. So we have to include them in our plans. What are we going to do with our special needs kids? We talked about the opt-out option, but you could even do that further. If you have a child in your school, or if your child is one of these kids that just cannot take the stress of a lockdown drill, there should be an opt-out. And the principal knows when the lockdown drills are going to be. And even if it's going to be an impromptu one, then you could say 5 minutes, call the teacher, bring the student down here or someplace else where they're not affected by the lockdown drill. What about an injury during your lockdown drill? Do you have first aid equipment? How would you handle an injury during that? Someone falls, someone gets hurt, other than someone getting actually injured by the attack. If you're doing a drill and somebody gets hurt, do you have a stop word or a safe word where you would say, and the whole drill comes to a close, right? And that's the only time that I look at phrases like that as something to consider. I might be okay with something, but you're probably better off just letting everybody know that using clear talk, stop the drill. We've had an injury, means everybody comes out of character, everything stops, and you attend to the injury. That's probably the better way to go. The size and scope of your drill. Okay, so a lot of us do Thursday afternoon at 1:00, and principal, are you ready? Let's go. Lockdown, right? And they push the button, they make the call, whatever they do. And that's good. We need to hear that sound and to react. So those are small drills. You can do medium-sized drills where you maybe have the local police show up and do a walkthrough during the drill. You can do it much more elaborate. So some of the ones we've done is we actually used, role players. We took a officer, young-looking officer, and we paired them up with a school security person, and we slipped them into the building, and we've had them scream and holler, I want Mr. Jones. Where's Mr. Jones? And that sets off the lockdown drill, the actual stimulus. Whoever sees it goes to their room, calls lockdown, whatever. However you decide to do it. You want to plan it out. It takes a lot of planning in advance. You got to gather all the stakeholders. You got to gather all the different organizations that would be involved. And then you want to plan out a drill. And a drill should have a goal. It should have an objective. And you should be able to see the things that you want to see. And you do that. So in a lot of the big drills we did, we included an injury, like during the lockdown part. Now the police officers come, they're searching the school, and one of the teachers has a fake heart attack and goes down because we included the first aid in our drill. Now they would call for the first aid. They would get to come in, take the person and take them out. We used the road department, right? Once the event was kicked off, the road department came and blocked off the roads just like they would in a real event. We've had outside agencies come. We had our county SWAT team show up so that they could participate. You can make these things very, very big or very, very small. So you want to decide on that. The bigger the drill, the more moving parts there are, harder to do. One of the things that I do is I help people build these drills. I build scenarios. I can come out and actually help you run it if you needed that. So the size and scope is a concern. How big should your drills be? Can everyone hear your PA systems? So I go to a lot of schools and we test the PAs. We go out on the fields, we test them here and there. Can they hear you in the bathrooms? This is why the flashing lockdown lights are important. It's another cue that there's an emergency, you need to do something. So you want to test those PAs. If they don't work, get them fixed. Do you have radios? And do they work? So my teaching when I talk to schools or businesses or anybody is that anybody on the emergency team should have a radio that's fully charged at all times, and they take it with them wherever they go in the building. So if something happens, they have that radio. When I talk about outside people, is anyone who goes outside your building with children should have a radio with them. So I've seen schools do it in a couple of different ways. They go to the office and they procure the radio. They sign out for it and they have it because they're going to go outside. I've seen other schools actually have a table by the doors that go out, and there is a go bag that has emergency equipment in it, first aid kind of stuff, and a radio and a charger. And they pick it up and out the door they go, and they have a radio every time they come and go. If you have volunteers watching the children, if you have employees watching the children at recess, they should have radios, not just one, a couple of them, and they should be positioned so that they could see danger coming and say, hey, I see a guy in the woods here, get everybody inside, right? You don't want to have somebody running, screaming at you from across the field and you're trying to figure out what they're saying. You want time equals life, right? There's a guy in the woods here. I don't know what this is all about, but get everybody in. So we want to look at that. How's your Wi-Fi and your cell service? Everywhere I go, I hear this is a problem. I hear, well, it's good in part of the building. No, it's good in another part of the building. Cell service, not so good. And then they count on their cell phones to call for help. Well, if you're counting on cell phones to call for help and your cell service doesn't work, then you need repeaters. You need to upgrade your equipment. Communication is extremely important, right? Communication in an emergency. Do you include the police, fire, EMS, and role players? That's part of deciding. Age appropriate drills. Let's look at that for a minute. Age appropriate drill. When I did live action drills in our high school, we were dealing with older kids who had a concept, who could deal with things better emotionally, this and that. Once we got good at doing that, we moved to the middle school where kids are old enough to understand. You teach them at the beginning of the year, you're going to do drills. There could be police running around. There could be people in the building when you're doing this drill. It's when you get below that to the elementary level that you have to be a little more concerned of how you do things. So as opposed to somebody going in screaming and hollering, maybe you have somebody come in to the office and demand to see their child and then take off running out of the office. No screaming. They just take off. Now the office staff activates the lockdown because somebody's here. They just took off into the building. Now you do the lockdown, and it's not traumatic with screaming and hollering in the hallways. For the young kids, the really young kids, how do you tell them? You tell these kindergartners, pre-K kids, bad man's going to come and try and hurt everybody, right? That could be tough for that age kid. But it's not tough for them. Stories that they know from their lives. So we all know the big bad wolf. What did the big bad wolf do when he showed up? He huffed and he puffed and he wanted to blow the door and he wanted to go in, right? And the little pigs had a fight to keep him out. So I created a PowerPoint for my school for the little ones to say, what do we do when the big bad wolf comes? Well, the teacher would say, "Oh my goodness, the big bad wolf is coming. What do we do? We have to hide. We have to throw our boots and our coats and everything in front of the door. And then we have to hide in our classroom and get down, right?" So then they weren't worried about somebody with a gun coming in to kill them. It was the big bad wolf. It was something that was in their world, that they understood. So we always have to do age appropriate drills. All right. When we talk about safety, I guess I'm going to cover it now. Every classroom door should have a window cover. So when you lock down, you cover the window. Because what we have seen is there's very few instances of all the school shootings that anyone ever shot through the window into the classroom. If they can't get in because the door's locked and the window's covered, they move on because they're looking for quick, easy victims. In Parkland, the cover came down, but it didn't come down all the way, and the kids were visible in the classroom, and he shot through the glass, and I believe he killed a young girl. So one of the things we talk about are safety corners, right? So you stand at the door in the hallway, and you look in the classroom, and at the point you can no longer see past a certain angle, you put tape on the ceiling, and everything behind that tape is your safety corner. People can't see you from the door. Right? And if you put the tape on the ceiling, it never comes down as opposed to the floor. It can get waxed off or peeled up when they're cleaning. Put it on the ceiling. Everybody gets behind that tape and you can't be seen from the door. Good window covers, lock the door, and get in the safety corner. Chain of command. Chain of command. So this covers who can call a lockdown. Is it just the principal? Is it principal and assistant principal? Is there principal and a counselor? Or can anybody call? This is usually a superintendent call to make a decision district-wide. Who's allowed to call? I suggest everyone. Anybody that sees danger should be able to call the building into lockdown. But you want to check on that and see what your school does. What do you think is best? You got to think it out and decide. Make sure everybody knows. The other thing I see is that in a lot of our schools, we will have principals and assistant principals leave the buildings for all kinds of reasons. They have to go to a meeting at the board office. They have to go to another school for a function, whatever it is. And they don't always tell the next in command that they're leaving. They will tell a clerical person, "Hey, just so you know, I'm heading out. Bob's in charge. Mary's in charge," whatever it is. "Oh, okay." And they're supposed to tell them. But then the phone rings, a parent shows up, and they forget. So we actually did a drill one time in a district that I've helped for a long time. And I said to the principal, "I want to do a lockdown drill, but I want you out of the building. I want you to tell everybody you have to go to the board, and then we're going to do a lockdown and see, first of all, how you communicate that, how that goes, and then see if the person who's next in line can handle being in charge," right? So the principal told one of the secretaries, "I'm leaving. I have to go to the board. Bob's in charge." And he walked out the door, got in his car, and drove away. And I walked in. I said, "Hi, how are you?" "Oh, good, Lieutenant Joe. What's up?" I said, "You got to put the building in lockdown." "Oh, we can't. The principal's not here." I said, "No, I'm telling you, put the building in lockdown right now." "Oh, okay." And they did. They put the building in lockdown. Lockdown, lockdown, lockdown. They lit the lights. They did all these things. And I said, where's Bob, the next in charge?" "Probably in his office." I went over there and I knocked on the door. I said, "Bob, it's Lieutenant Joe here." I said, "You're in charge of the building." "No, I'm not. Frank's the principal. Frank's not here." "He's not?" Because nobody told him that Frank wasn't there. So what I insist on, and you should insist on, is that we don't do, hey, tell somebody something. What you do is either you do a face-to-face, "I'm leaving the building, you're in charge," or you do a phone call, voice-to-voice. So it's either face-to-face or voice-to-voice, not through a middle person. "Hey, Mary, I'm leaving the building. You're in charge." "Okay, I get it." Now there's no mistake in there. And that's not the first time that has happened, because I do that often to test that exact situation. So that's the chain of command. Who's in charge? What if your principal is knocked out of the chain, injured, not there, killed in an event like in Sandy Hook? The principal was killed. So what do? You have to plan on that contingency. Who's in charge, and do they know they're in charge? All right. Do you have good places for lockdown if violence erupts? So one of the things an assessment does is that you go around and you look at the building, and I go to the gym and I say, "Okay, how would you lock these gym doors? Do you have those push bars? right? Is that what you have? Well, how do you lock those push bars to keep everybody in? So some people say a custodian has to come in the hallway and lock the lock. Do you think a custodian's going to come down that hallway when there's somebody shooting a gun? No, you're going to have an unprotected room. So there's lots of things you could do with those push bars. You have modern ones that have a built-in lock. You flip it and you lock the door. And now you can get out, you get egress, but nobody can get in. Well, Lieutenant Joe, what happens when a student has to go to the door? Well, then they knock on the door and somebody has to answer the door. You're talking about life and death here. There are things also that I have access to. They're straps. These are lockdown straps, and they go around the safety bar. You push it in and you snap it into place. It holds the bar in that place. You pre-lock the door, and then people can come and go, no problem. In an emergency, anybody pulls the strap, the bar throws out, and the room is completely safe. Then where do you lock down? So gyms often have locker rooms attached to them. That's great. So if you can get everybody in the locker room, which is usually a concrete building, and you can lock that door, now you have two layers of security between the bad person and your students. They have to get into the gym first, then they got to get into the locker room. So you want thumb locks in those gym locker rooms so that they're easy, big muscle things to turn them, right? Turn them easy and you're locked in. Then there's usually water and there's bathrooms in there. So you can have a lot of people locked in those locker rooms for a long period of time. In many schools, I see that they're often a exit to the outside world, to the parking lot from the locker room. That's even better. If you had to evacuate or flee, you have a way out. Is the equipment you have in place helping create a safe environment? Now, I know most of us have cameras now, right? We all have cameras. Do we have anybody watching the cameras, right? So you need a security operations center because you have all these cameras that provide you a good view of seeing approaching danger. Excellent. The problem is, if nobody's watching the camera, then nobody sees the approaching danger. So you should have dedicated staff. Yes, that costs money, Lieutenant Joe. Yes, it does. You're talking life and death. And what is the value to you to have an employee paid to watch the cameras so that they see somebody coming towards the school from any direction? They can see it and make an announcement and save people, right? It's much more a better value than having to add zeros to the checks you're going to pay when they say you had this equipment and nobody was watching it. What were you thinking, right? So that's really good. Do you have the lockdown lights? Do you have vestibules? Do you have the safety glazing on the glass so that while somebody could shoot through it, the glass doesn't drop? In the Covenant School, you can see the video. It's online. The shooter shot the glass dropped and right in. Same thing in Sandy Hook. They did lockdowns. They had locked doors. Really good. Shooter shot the glass and it dropped. Safety glazing is clear glazing that goes on the window and it's secured to the frame. Nobody ever knows it's there. It's crystal clear. And you can shoot through it, but the glass doesn't drop. So if you had a guy my size, I'm a big guy. If I took a 20-pound sledge and I went at that glass, it would probably take me 2 to 3 minutes to knock that glass out. In 2 to 3 minutes, you got a guy bashing on your front door. You know you got danger. You can lock down. You can call for help. You can do a lot of things. Time equals life. So that glass is probably the most inexpensive thing you could do. And you start with your front entry. Why? Because that's where bad guys normally come, front door and back door. Why? Because that's where we come and go. That's where everybody comes and goes, right? So you do your front entrance, then you do your back entrance, then maybe you want to do your whole first floor over the course of time. You budget for that, but that's very important. Do you have swipe cards? Do you have fobs? How many fobs do you have? So if you have the back of your building, you have all these doors and you only have one swipe entrance every 100 yards. Well, when people are running, that's a long distance. So you want to make sure you have a couple of extra swipe card entrances there so people can get in, right? When we talk about equipment in another episode, we're going to go in detail with this. The next question is, do you practice realistic drills? Are your drills realistic? So we know from training, I'm a master trainer. I've been training for many, many years. I'm a trained trainer, right? One of the things we know is that what makes drills valuable is that when there's realism and there's stress, right? Because if not, we're just, talking about stuff. We're checking off a box. If there's realism and stress, and I don't mean scaring everyone to death, but realism, involved in this. That's where a role player can help, or an impromptu drill can help, because now people are not sure, but they respond the way they've been trained, and they get inoculated to fear and they just move. So do you practice realistic drills? Now, when it comes to the young ones, to the little kids, you say, what do we do with them? And, what do we teach them? Well, we teach everyone. If you're in the hallway, the teacher, when they hear the lockdown call, unless the gunfire is right outside the door, they should do a quick sweep, look around. If they see anybody, pull them in. If there's a bathroom across the hallway and they can do it safely, do a sweep of the bathroom. Is there anybody in here? Let's go into the room. If they can't, they can't. That's one of the hard parts of this. You got to save who you can save. And if there's people outside in the hallway being dangerous, you can lock your door. That's what you have to do. Right. So we did this drill training with it was a pre-K through 5 school. And we did the training for the students and staff and everybody. And a couple months later, I was there and I said, let's do an impromptu drill. Let's lock down. And the principal said, okay, I'm willing to do it. Lock the building down. So everybody locks down. We're checking it. Boy, how fast are our goals, right? In our drills, what are we looking for? And then the principal said, oh, that was pretty good. That was fast. I like this and like that. We checked the rooms. It was all good. And the principal calls the drill off. Okay, the drill is over. Thank you so much. Everyone did a great job. Well, we're standing there. And this little angel comes popping out. What, maybe 6 years old, 5-year-old little girl comes popping out of the bathroom. And we said, hey, what were you doing in the bathroom? She said, well, I heard the lockdown and I couldn't get to my classroom. So teacher said to go in the bathroom, stand on the toilet and lock the door. And that's what I did. That little girl, 5 or 6-year-old little kid, saved her life because we trained her. She wasn't panicked. She was skipping down the hallway, going to her next thing. She didn't know if it was real or not. She did what she was trained to do, right? And that's important because that little girl is alive. So the last thing we're going to cover for this episode is the 3 pillars of survival. Now, this is an article that I wrote. Anybody can have the article. You can look it up. Joseph Pangaro, 3 Pillars of Survival. It's been printed in many, many places. If you want it, joe@pangarotraining.com, and I will send you the article. I wrote the article because I get a lot of people say, Lieutenant Joe, there's a lot of things to consider for safety and security. How can we keep track of it all? And it's true. There's tons and tons of things. So I said, how do I break this down? How do I break this down into a more manageable piece? So I thought about it, and I broke it down into 3 pillars of survival. And I've actually added one. I'll tell you about at the end. 3 pillars of survival plus 1. So the 3 pillars, if you think about these 3 pillars I'm going to tell you, and you look at each one individually, and you ask every question you can about it, you think about every scenario it could be involved in, and you think of how you could deal with it. If you do that with these 3 pillars, you go very, very far to making your facility safer. So, Lieutenant Joe, what are the 3 pillars? Well, here they come. The first pillar is preparation. Preparation is the first pillar of survival for any organization, for any place. So what's involved in preparation? Well, what you're doing right now. You're watching this episode. Hopefully you're taking some notes. You're understanding some things. You're seeing some ideas that you can do. That's preparation. Now you do drills. That's preparation. You do a threat assessment so you know where your security gaps are. That's preparation. You train your staff. That's preparation. You run good drills of value. That's preparation, right? So anything you can do to prepare yourself better, to understand, have better equipment, and to practice better is preparation. The second pillar is communication. And in communication, what we're talking about, how does somebody in your building who sees danger, how does that person tell everybody else that there's danger and they need to take action, whether that be lockdown, flee, or whatever? Right, so communication. Do you have radios? Do the PAs on your phones work? Do you use cell phones? Do you have good cell service? Do you use internet? Do you have good internet? Do you have the push buttons on the wall? Whatever you have, how does that teacher on the second floor who sees somebody walking towards your school with a rifle tell everybody that there's danger coming and we have to lock down? Time equals life. So this is how we connect the two. Whoever sees the danger should call it fast, fast, fast. The faster we go, the better off we're going to be. So that's the second pillar. How does everybody in that building communicate knowing that there's danger? And the third one is notification. How do you call the good guy and good girl guns to come and help you? Now, I know a lot of people don't like guns. They don't like this and that. And I get it. It's a personal thing. But the reality is you got somebody trying to get in your school or in your school with a gun. The only thing that's going to stop that person is a good guy or good girl with a gun. That's the reality. It's the only thing that's going to stop them. So how do you notify them you need help? Well, if you have SROs, that's good because they can make a call. Do you have an SRO in every building, or do you have a traveling SRO who may not be in your building when the bad thing happens? Do you have security officers unarmed? And do they have radios? Can they make it? Good. What if you don't have either two? You don't have security guards and you don't have SROs. How do you call the police? Do you have somebody physically dial 911? Do you push a button? Do you knock a phone off the hook like I told you in New York they have in some of the schools I've seen? What is your process for calling for help? Right? So you want to think about all these things. If you go through each pillar, preparation, what else can we do to prepare? What other equipment can we have to prepare? What policy can we have to prepare? Then communication. How would we tell everybody? Is ours proper? Is it good? Is it in good service? Do we need new? Do we need to replace? Whatever it is. And then notification. How do we call for that help? And the one that I've added now, 3 pillars plus 1, I did a threat assessment for a district in upstate New York who are very, very concerned about doing the right thing. I've been there a couple times. And I thought about it and I said, mental health is something we don't really talk about in America, but we need to. And they took that to heart. At the time, I think they had a counselor in the school, one for each kind of the schools. Now they got specialized counselors for all their schools, that when a young person comes up and they're having a problem, or there's a rumor, or there's a social media post, or there's something that gives indication that somebody is potentially having a problem that could lead to violence, we intervene before they do it. And they hired quite a few mental health counselors to really help everyone deal with the stress they're having before they had a problem. And that is something that we all need to look at. Mental health is a big component of this violence. So if we don't have anyone there to deal with it, we're going to have a problem. So most of us have counselors. Consider getting more. Very, very good expenditure of your dollars to get some help. All right, so that's the 3 pillars of survival plus 1. This was our coverage today on concerns. And when we come back to episode 3, we're going to keep going because there's a lot more things for us to learn about. Thanks for being here, everybody. I'm going to stop sharing real quick. Go back to Lieutenant Joe and say, I like sayings. So you hear me say a lot of sayings when I do this teaching. And one of the sayings I think is pretty good, covers everything, is you do not want the first time you have to do something or respond to something be the first time you thought about it. So use the 3 pillars of survival to help you prepare yourselves, practice, get the right equipment so that you can survive a violent incident. And that's really our goal for everybody here. So we'll be back soon here on Hope is Not a Tactic with episode 3 on running drills of value.